Cathie, let's start with you in Calgary. You are opposed to spanking. You would, though, like to see the law changed, would you not?
I would. And I think we have to recognize that, when we know about child development, and we know a lot more now than we ever did before, we know that at birth their brains are only 23% developed. They have no self-regulation. And self-regulation is something that we learn throughout our life, and we learn it from our environment. It seems to me that because we do have lots of other tools that we can use, why would we use spanking that actually does not teach self-regulation?
Dave, would you disagree with that stand?
Well, I would agree with a great deal of that. The role of brain development as children, epigenetics of their environment as they mature is an important factor. However, appropriate discipline can be, and corporal punishment is one way, one other tool that many parents will use and should have in their toolbox. Doesn't mean they're going to use it all the time, nor should they. However, it's one tool that is available to them.
So, Dave, you like the law as it stands right now, the way criminal code recognizes corporal punishment?
The Supreme Court of Canada looked at Section 43 of the Criminal Code, the spanking laws, it's known, and reviewed it in 2004, I believe it was, and said, no, it should stay the way it is. And I do concur with that. I believe that it's an appropriate way of doing things. It differentiates between child abuse and child discipline, and we do need to note that publicly right off the start, that a child abuse is not appropriate in any form at all, whether it's physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse. That just simply is not a starter for anybody here and is completely inappropriate. However, child discipline is a different matter altogether, and parents need to have a wide variety of tools in their parenting toolbox in order to raise their children appropriately. Every child will react differently, and even in different situations, but parents should have a full range of tools if at all possible.
And that would include being able to spank a child.
Yes.
I guess the question I have to ask is, why would spanking even be necessary? If the parents are actually learning the different skills, then why would we even need that one? Our laws have changed to protect our children in many different ways. We put seatbelts on them in cars. We decided that smoking isn't a good idea around children. And if we look at ourselves as parents, our job is to keep them safe, mind, body, and spirit. And I cannot see how, when we spank a child, we're keeping them their spirits safe.
This is a good juncture to bring Mark Ammon in. Mark, Dave referenced the 2004 Supreme Court decision that upheld a parent's right to spank.
Yes.
As the law stands right now, what is legal, what is not, for those parents who maybe do not know and might be surprised to know?
And the Supreme Court in 2004 did add a lot of clarification here, because the section in the Criminal Code is fairly general. It refers to physical force so long as it is reasonable in the circumstances, which isn't really a good standard. So the Supreme Court's decision elaborates on this and provides some concrete guidance in relation to what is reasonable. So, for example, when they're talking about reasonable uses of force, it's inevitably an open hand, and it is applied in a corrective manner with no more force than is necessary for the purpose of correction. Things that are expressly not going to be falling under that section, according to the court, would be things like striking with an implement, like a belt or a stick or a ruler, striking a child's head, or using more force than is necessary, or applying corporal punishment in a manner that would be degrading or humiliating, a way that would add sort of psychiatric negative things in addition to the physical punishment, humiliating, embarrassing the child with that type of thing. Those fall on the line of not covered by Section 43. So those would not be acceptable uses of corporal punishment in Canada.
Cathie, does that not draw enough of a line for you?
I don't think so, because when you look at spanking, it's often, as parents, do we step back? Our child's done something we don't like. Are we stepping back and saying, oh, okay, I need to discipline this child, so I am going to spank them once? No. We usually respond from an emotional point of view, and so it's very easy to get, if we're not getting the response we think the child should show, it's very easy to keep going. And, children are quick at, depending on their personalities, is their normal reaction fight, flight, or submit? And for spanking, if the child doesn't submit, it's very easy for that emotional response in the parent where they keep going. And so we're asking for self-regulation, and yet parents are not always that good at self-regulation themselves.
So do you think parents are acting irrationally then?
I think it's easy to step out of that line. I don't say that all parents are, but when I'm emotionally charged, it's very hard to have a real easy give and take conversation. And so I think when we're dealing with children, children bring out a very deep emotion in us. And so it's hard to find that line.
So do you equate emotion with abuse then?
I think it can, yes.
One of the other things that actually came up prior to the Supreme Court judgment and some of the arguments was that the way spanking tends to be applied, this is obviously from the challenger's point of view, it works on sort of a continuum. So you wind up starting out perhaps with reasonable force, but as child behavior may change or perhaps escalate, parents may find themselves in a situation where to provide that type of punishment in a consistent fashion, they need to escalate the types of force that they're using. So one concern that was raised by the challengers in that case were that even if you start out applying it in a reasonable fashion, there's the potential to slip into unreasonable uses of force, basically because of the nature of the way that type of corporal punishment is going to be applied.
Dave, let's ask you about this. Where do you draw the line between punishment for bad behavior and when it becomes abusive?
Well, that is going to vary a little bit, but some general guidelines, I would say. One, a young child, an infant under 12 months, 18 months of age, I agree with Cathie, the development is not there for them to understand why they're getting the spanking, and so that was completely inappropriate. Over an age of probably 8 to 10 years of age, and that's going to vary on the child, again, is probably more degrading to them than it is to be a useful disciplinary technique. And so there is that age range to start with. Certainly that any discipline needs to be taken care of in as least emotional possibility as possible. Parents need to be in control of that situation. The science is very clear that where a child is disciplined with 1 or 2 swats on the bum by an open hand, that in fact the results can be very positive. However, it should not be severe, so it shouldn't be a beating of any sort at all, nor should it be the only and the regular type of discipline that's used. That just simply becomes then that, well, every little thing is disciplined by spanking, and that's inappropriate as well. There needs to be a rationale. Children need to learn and understand, and parents need to understand perhaps why the child is in this emotional state as well. Is there something that's gone wrong at school or on the playground or in the household that's upsetting them? Those are all different factors that need to be taken into account, and that's very important when we as parents are dealing with our children. Many parents have said, that I've talked to over the years, have said, I put up with this all day. We tried to talk it through. We had timeouts. We had other forms of discipline, and nothing worked. And at the end of the day, a swat in the bum, and suddenly everything was back to normal again. And so there's a time and a place for it, but it's a swat in the bum is not the useful technique in every situation.
Okay, after the break. Cathie,
I would have to ask how that actually deals with the issue.
Okay, after the break, the ramifications of spanking. Does it have a lasting impact into adulthood? And tell us what you think. Should spanking be legal in Canada? Follow the contact links at albertaprimetime.com. We are back with our panel in 60 seconds.